Welcome back to Naked Folk. I'm your host, Haley Folk, and today we're talking to Melissa Saavedra, the CEO and founder of Steamy Lit. She has a romance book and sexual wellness subscription service, so the idea is that you buy a quarterly box and it comes with a romance book and also a vibrator. So we're going to talk to her today about how she got started. Stay tuned to listen in and let's get naked. Awesome. We are recording. Well, thank you so much for joining Naked Folk, where we talk about sex, relationships, all kind of steamy topics, and things that are considered taboo. And today we have Melissa with us from Steamy Lit. I would love, first off, if you could say a little bit about yourself and also your pronouns to kick us off.
Sure. My name's Mel or Melissa. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a lot of things. I was born in Peru. I am 32 years old. Recently divorced. I am the founder and owner of Steamy Lit, home to the Steam Box, where we pair romance books with vibrators and. I am an avid reader. I'm a dog mom, and I love my vibrators.
That is an amazing answer. I also love my vibrators. I'm like, I don't know if you know, but I do sex and relationships writing, and so I do a lot of vibrator reviews. So it's pretty fun in my work to get to like
Ooh.
try different things and um, give other people who would use a vibrator like a real person's advice on what is good and what isn't. Um, but yeah, I'm so glad that you're on the podcast. I would love to talk about first off what inspired you to start Steamy Lit. Also, for those who don't know what Steamy Lit is, maybe just give some context because I think I'm on TikTok all the time and I see like smut books, for example, or like TikTok romance section. And when I learned about Steamy Lit, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect for so many people.
Thank you. Sure. Um, Steamy Lit started during the pandemic, and I was married at the time, and my ex-spouse was in the military, and he was deployed through like the whole pandemic year. And I really turned to romance books. I was home from work, isolated like the rest of the world. And I really turned to romance books to kind of just like lighten lighten my spirits, I guess, and just like happily ever after, haha, in two different ways. And I as I was reading, I realized two things. Like, is anyone else horny? And also, where's the diversity in romance? And so, to the horny portion, I was like, wow, someone should really pair romance books with vibrators. But also, like, romance books felt like such a great, like, intro and sex way into, or segue into, like, figuring out like what you like, what you don't like, even in just like relationships, personal relationships, romantic relationships, etc. And so I when I was launching Steamy Lit, or when I created Steamy Lit, I was like, I want to kind of remove some of that stigma and taboo around talking about sex and pleasure, and also talk about romance and diversity in romance. And so that's where Steamy Lit was born. I like to say at this point, Steamy Lit is more of a community. Like, sure, we are a romance online bookstore, but like, we are so much more than that. Like, we provide different services, whether that's, a Steam box, which is our adult romance box, or a SUNY Lit box, which is our YA box. But we also sell the different sexual wellness items, and we sell books, and we sell merch. And within these spaces, we have community, and we talk about sex and orgasms and pleasure. And then we talk about romance books and what's in them and what's not in them. And that's kind of the background of Steamy Lit and how we got started.
That's amazing. I specifically really like the portion that you mentioned about diversity and how like, I was reading on Steamy Lit's site that the one of the main pillars of your mission is to kind of highlight diversity and inclusion. And I think that that's so cool because, in so many areas in life, there is a lack of diversity. And I was wondering if you could talk about sort of the way that you think about diversity when it comes to romance books and what you hope to see for the future as far as Steamy Lit goes to help bring the diversity to the forefront.
Sure. I think diversity for me just means, especially in romance, just means seeing everybody get a happily ever after or a happily for now, and not just white folks or white cis folks, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, being able to like diversify through romance means reading about people who look like you or look like your friend or the person you're dating, in this happiness. I feel like there's so much, especially in literature, there's so much in our narratives, so much trauma, right? And like when someone reads a book by a Latinx person, they almost expect this like immigration traumatic story. Um, but while those stories are beautiful, there's a different portion to that like we also deserve to see ourselves in a happy, light space where um, we don't have to be just our trauma. We're more than just our trauma, right? And so, um, and as far as how Steamy Lit continues or just plans to continue to do that work, different things, right? And diversity is. Um, Something that continues to evolve as we continue to try to be inclusive for different groups of people who have just been marginalized, by publishing, right? And so making sure that we are, featuring different authors that, um, you know, are writing stories that are diverse, that are writing stories with characters that are diverse. And then recently we launched, our nonprofit, which is Steamy LitCon, and through Steamy LitCon, we're kind of, continuing to do that work of creating a space for authors that have been just underrepresented in publishing for too long, and try to continue to move the needle and prove to publishing that like the sales are there, that people do want to read these stories, that these stories are important and that they matter.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I have my MFA in nonfiction and I wrote a memoir. And I have heard from so many people who have tried to get published, especially marginalized people, that it is really, really difficult to be represented by big publishing houses, which is so unfortunate. And it kind of it makes me think about what is kind of the future of publishing. And ultimately, I think people like you are doing such good work. And going back to what you said about kind of finding lightness and having a representation of lightness and joy, I think that's, incredibly impactful as well. When you choose, the books that you kind of send out, what is the process for that? Obviously, I'm imagining it includes showing diversity and including authors who are maybe underrepresented. But what else, like what other things attract you to a book?
Um, it's just a tough question. A lot of it, just like is the plot, like is it a book that I can't put down? Is it
Mm-hmm.
unput downable, right? Like, am I just like eager to flip pages? Sometimes we have books that have like maybe a more serious theme, like talk about more, the different things, mental health, etc., that are a little bit strong but also like so real. So I try to do like a balancing act of making sure I kind of include, different like areas of romance, and something that might be a rom-com, and then something that's like a little bit more just, talks about a little bit more heavier topics. But then also in that, I try to be mindful about the kind of romance and sex that is, portrayed in the books, because I think that sometimes people think, or sometimes there's discourse in our community that like we need books that are open door scenes, which just means that like the sex scenes are very like detailed, right?
Mhm.
Or like some books are just like fade to black, etc. But I think that that narrative excludes so many people, specifically people who are part of the ace community and identify as ace, right? Just because
Mhm.
um, they experience sexuality and pleasure and romance in a different way, and there's a spectrum to that, and so being able to also represent that in our books, um I hope is making other folks feel seen. We're like, no, I mean, like, sure, you can have this like open door banging in front of whoever you want scene but like you can also have this like really powerful fade to black scene that is not just that, right? And so
Mhm.
um I try to kind of balance it all out and like what our picks are. Sometimes I'll read something too ahead of time where I'm like, okay, maybe this will be better for the spring or for the winter or for the fall or whatever. But yeah, it's just basically like how is the book sitting with me, and we do have some people on our team sometimes who will help me read, and so I trust their recommendations as well. We have like a little chart going of like the different books we're reading and like what we like about them, the tropes and different things like that, and that kind of
Mhm.
helps us like narrow down what we want to pick.
That's so fun. I feel like that's a really cool job to have. Like, if your job is to read books and just decide which ones you like best and which could be helpful for some folks, I think that that's so cool. Like, um, especially if your teammates get to contribute. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
When it comes to, so when someone gets a box, what could they expect to be inside? Like how many books? And is there anything else? You know, you mentioned that you include a vibrator. Like, do you work with certain brands to include those vibrators, or are they specifically just ones that you like that you've chosen to put in?
Yeah, so everything is chosen definitely. Like we work with some brands, but not on like a let's put this vibe in the box type of thing. More like what's your catalog, and then I'll pick from that. Um, but it's so the box is a quarterly box, and so you get three books in the box. You get a vibrator if you choose one. There's also like a book only option if you don't want any of that, you just want the books. And there's a no vibe option, which then you get the three books, and then we usually put about like 3 to 5 self care items in that, or bookish items, and it just kind of depends on like the season. Like if it's summer, I usually try to send some kind of like SPF product. If it's winter, I try to send something that's a little bit more hydrating, or like a lip balm or something like that. Sometimes we do candles. We just want it to be like a whole experience when you're
Mhm.
like unpacking your box. That like if you wanted to sit down and read your book and like take a bath and like do these different things, that we have things in the box that will like aid you with that process. And then as far as the vibrators go, I also get to test out a lot, and that's a great part of my job. Um, and so it just kind of depends. Sometimes, like I don't have some brands on my radar, and I'll get something sent to me, and it's like a great toy. Sometimes we have customers who like say, "Hey, I really love this brand. Like, why don't you check them out?" And so sometimes we'll do that, and we're actually going to do that with the fall box. And I can't remember for the life of me the name of the company off the top of my head right now, but they're like a very eco-friendly. They are also, I believe, help with like folks who have um, like any kind of like hand like disability, where they're like a little bit more inclusive in that sense of like how the vibrator can be held. Is it Nature's Company? I don't know. I can't remember right now, but I tried one of their products recently, and I was like mind blown, and I was like, oh yeah, my soul left my body. This needs to go in the box.
That's that's like the exact review that you want from a vibrator, I think, in my opinion. So
Yeah, same.
going back to kind of like what like your purpose behind the brand, I just think that it's so cool that you have managed to create like something that is really a community and that people can feel comfortable to go to and talk about steamy literature and what they like. And I think that steamy romance books are a great way to figure out what you like, maybe things that you want to try. If you're single, maybe you're just looking to explore yourself, or incorporate it with a partner if you have a partner. Do you feel like the customers of Steamy Lit have given you some feedback as if it's helped them to kind of discover more about themselves?
Yeah, and those are the messages or like the emails that we love to receive. If they like try to vibrator for the first time, then it might be like a first orgasm situation or just like a different product that they experience for the first time. Oh, excuse me. Um, and we don't do this as much anymore, but it's something that I recently just like went full time with the company, which like before I was working a full time job, so it was a little harder.
Mhm.
And now that I have a little bit more time, I'm trying to like kind of like focus more on like the community aspect and just like creating more of a forum for people to like ask questions and like have more dialogue about just like sex and exploration of their bodies and things like that. Early on, we brought in like a sex therapist to like talk to us through some stuff, and that was like really really fun. Um, and in that, like creating that safe space, right, of like being able to like ask these questions freely and without stigma, without shame, and having those conversations that we too often don't have with people.
Mhm. Yeah, I think sex is one of those things that can be a really intimidating topic for people who aren't necessarily doing it like as part of their job. Like sometimes I
Right.
forget for me, like I'll be talking to someone and I'm like, oh, like I'm a sex and relationships writer and I'll tell them some stuff about what I'm working on. And sometimes I don't realize, like, oh, like some people aren't comfortable with these topics and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I have to remind myself. And I think that there's different intros to it, right? Like we can get back to the basics of sex and sexuality and what it means to kind of have pleasure for yourself. And this is such a good entry point, I think, for a lot of people to even recognize in themselves what sparks joy for them and what even is like, oh, I
Right.
think I'm like that or I don't. I have a friend who is kind of in a similar situation where she was uncomfortable with talking about sex with her friends or her partner, but she started reading, Smut and has kind of evolved into, oh, I love this and I think I might be into this kink. And the kink world doesn't just have to be about pain or whatever, it can be so many other avenues and it can be romantic. And she definitely has recommended 5 to 10 books to me that I should read.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm curious what your favorite romance novel you have ever read is, if you have one. I know favorites are kind of a hard question.
It's probably Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. That's like a top five. I won't even say a top. It's like the top for me. Kennedy Ryan just has a really like beautiful poetic way in which she writes her like stories and how like the romance develops. It's just like a very poetic beautiful thing. And then she also writes like, I always tell her, you are like the author that like can make me horny and cry in the span of a chapter. Like her like sex scenes are like fucking fabulous. She will definitely make you cry. But then she also writes like really deeply. And Long Shot, the book I'm talking about, talks about domestic partner violence and abuse, and the amount of like research that she does and in the characters in the book are just like so well done. Um, but that's definitely a heavier book. Like if it's something that you're gonna read, make sure you read it with care and caution because it does have very heavy triggers. But it's such a beautiful love story that I think everyone should read. Um, yeah, that's probably my number one. But on a lighter, I can't even think of one right now. I'm like looking around the Steam box room.
Yeah, you have books all around you.
I'm like also Yeah, I'm also a Cancer, and so I like love to cry and like be emotional. So like Kennedy is like up my alley.
That's so nice. I'm a Gemini, but I also love to cry, and I'm not a typical Gemini. I am a Leo moon, so I'm definitely a little bit more on the emotional side, and I
Oh,
love anything that makes me feel deeply
Yeah.
or like moves me in some way, like if I'm thinking about something differently after reading it, I just really love that kind of book. And it's like after I did my MFA, it was really hard for me to get back into reading for fun because I was reading like 2 to 3 books a week, and they were usually pretty heavy books. So I've been trying to kind of
Yeah.
explore my own space in reading romance novels for fun. And I've so far the number one book that people have recommended to me is, I think it's Akatar. Have you?
So that's like a fantasy. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a it's a romance plot, but it's fantasy. So I mean, if that's your jam, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm generally
I
not a fantasy
I don't
reader.
think I mean I love the I yeah I love the series, but I think if you're not a fantasy reader, it might like not. But it's a very popular series, and like the romance elements are very heavy, and like I can see why there's that appeal, but if fantasy's not your jam, I wouldn't start there.
Yeah, I've been kind of trying to explore, and I've been doing a lot of Google searching to kind of find the right fit. I haven't actually bought a book yet, but I was thinking about getting my own Steamy Lit box just because I think I would really enjoy it, and I think it would be a fun way for me to get back into reading in that way. Um, but as far as like things that you're really proud of that are coming up that you're working on, is there anything that that's inspiring you right now, or projects that you're working on that you feel you want to mention?
Yeah, so we are working on, well, it's already on pre-sale, but it's our Latinx like celebration box we do every year. And for this is the second year that we do it in collaboration with Amor en Páginas, which is a um, how do I explain Amor en Páginas? It's a kind of a community. It's a book club essentially, but they promote Latinx romance authors and titles, and that's kind of like their whole mission to like amplify the work of Latin people. And so um, this is the second year we do a collaboration with them, and because I'm Latina, being able to find romance books with just like people in my community is really special for me and makes me really feel seen. So that's always a special box for me. And we also donate 5% of each box to Latinx in Publishing, which is like an organization that helps Latinx folks get into the publishing industry. And then we are like prepping for Steamy LitCon 2024, which is like a big undertaking. We just got our nonprofit status, so that has been fantastic. And Steamy LitCon is a romance book convention that aims to um, amplify the work of authors, part of marginalized communities and identities, and just like really celebrate diversity in romance. And in there, I've like snuck in pleasure and how we like talk about that and navigate that, and hope that we can continue to do that.
That's amazing. And do you feel like it has to be snuck in terms of like including pleasure because it is such a sensitive topic for some?
No, I don't think so. I think that because people who know Steamy Lit know that that's like a mission of Steamy
Mhm.
Lit. I don't think that they were surprised when I was like, "Hey, we have a sexuality panel, like a keynote panel," which was like really cool. But I think even something I try to always say is whatever embracing your sexuality looks like for you, as long as shame is removed from that, like then it works for you and it's okay. Like it doesn't have to be what me and you do, right? It's like whatever it looks like for you, it's totally fine. And that's just like my encouragement to people overall. Like embracing your sexuality and being comfortable with your sexuality and pleasure looks different for everyone. It doesn't have to look the same for any two people.
Mhm.
So, whatever look that looks like for you is totally fine. And I think that even within our romance community, there's still a lot of room for conversation around embracing sexuality and um, removing shame and just kind of like unlearning some of these like beliefs and stigmas that like patriarchy has essentially taught us.
Mhm. Yeah, I fully agree with that. I went to an event recently with the founder of Bloomy. I don't know if you know that brand, but she is a Latina
Yeah,
woman who owns, yeah, she's great. Her products like Bloomy are in Target, which is so cool. She's actually going to be on the podcast in a few weeks, which I'm excited about. And I went to one of her events where she does an educational
amazing.
panel, and it was just so cool to witness people coming together and learning about sex in a way that is not shameful and kind of getting back to the basics of what really makes you feel pleasure versus like what are you doing for your partner's sake, what are you doing for society's sake, and how can we break down the barriers and talk about sex in a way that's comfortable and fun for everyone, because it should be fun, right? And yeah, it was just so cool to see like a group of women come together and have an experience. And I'm obviously a white woman, and I was in this space, and I just felt honored to be in the space to listen to the stories of women who were talking about, coming from a culture where maybe like their parents didn't talk to them about sex, or it wasn't accepted to be queer, or everything that comes
Sure.
with that. And I just thought it was amazing. So I think it's cool that you're moving that needle along and doing things to further help people.
Yeah, Rebecca was actually part of our keynote for our like romance and sexuality and pleasure panel, and it was great. It was great. It was I loved being able to see again, right? Because in our cultures and in a Latina household, you don't talk about sex and pleasure. It's not like common, right? So
Mhm.
seeing someone in our community create a brand that is based on sexuality and pleasure is really special. I especially love her videos when like her parents go to Target and see her
Yeah.
like products there. It's really great.
I know. I That's actually how I was introed to her, because I saw her video on TikTok and I was like, this is so heartwarming. I think it had like 3 million views or something, and people in the comments were so supportive. And I just love when, you see the generational barriers being broken down too, and you can really start to talk to the people that you love about sex in a way that isn't like raunchy or strange or weird feeling, but is just, hey, this is a part of life, and
Right.
as women, we all deserve to have access to our own pleasure.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazing. Well, I wanted to know where people could find you. Like if that's socials or, your website, what's the best place for people to find Steamy Lit and yourself?
Sure. So we have our website is steamylit.com. And then on socials, if you want to keep up with my chaotic life, you can find me at Book Rex by Mel. I don't do too many book recommendations anymore, but you're definitely like in my daily life of like packing books and vibrators, which could be fun. And then for Steamy Lit, you can go at Steamy Lit on Instagram and TikTok, and the Steambox Co on Instagram for the Steambox for Adult Box. And then if you want to keep up with the convention, it's Steamy Lit Con.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely be following all of those. I'm excited to kind of see how your journey goes, and I'm also going to be signing up to get a
Thank
box
you.
myself.
Oh, sensational.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the pod. I think these conversations are so important, and this is such a great way for people to access pleasure, access learning about themselves, learning what them and their partner might want to try, and also just in general having fun. I think that sometimes in life we forget to have fun, and this is a great way to both have fun and read if you enjoy reading, but also have pleasure and experience self discovery.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.